Welcome to L2R. I'm Kinaesthesia, and today I'll be going over our strategy for Cho'gall on the 25 normal difficulty. Cho'gall is the final boss in the Bastion of Twilight raid instance. There are some fun new mechanics in this fight, and we're sure that with our strategy guide, you'll have no problem mastering them all. The Cho'gall encounter is a somewhat complex fight that is essentially a test of your raid's DPS. It introduces a mechanic unique to this fight called Corrupted Blood, and your raid must defeat Cho'gall before being completely corrupted. He has 101 million HP. We use 2 tanks, 5 healers, and 18 DPS. With more gear and higher DPS, the fight will be easily doable with 6 healers or even 7, if your raid favors stability over speed. The DPS makeup should be balanced between melee and range, though your raid may favor particular interrupt classes for the mind control mechanic that will be explained more in depth later. For now, let's cover the Corrupted Blood mechanic. At the beginning of the fight, each member of the raid will have a UI element or graphic added to their screen that tracks their corruption level. Throughout the fight, the abilities Cho'gall and his ads use will cause stacks of corrupted blood. Raid members will be afflicted with varying debuffs depending on how high their corrupted blood is. This mechanic is similar to Madness from the Yogg-Saron encounter, and at least initially should be approached the same way. Avoid gaining corrupted blood at all costs. Here are the debilitations raid members will gain as their debuff grows. At level 1, 25%, players will gain Corruption Accelerated. This will cause them to gain 2 stacks of corrupted blood every second for 1 minute. This is magic dispellable and should be removed immediately. At level 2, 50%, players will be afflicted with Corruption Sickness. This will cause them to periodically vomit and cause 40,000 damage to all friendly players in a 5-yard cone in front of them. This vomit will also cause corrupted blood. Players must be sure to face away from other raid members before vomiting. At level 3, 75%, players will gain Corruption Malformation. A tentacle will grow out of the player's back and shoot shadow bolts at nearby raid members. At level 4, 100%, players are afflicted with Corruption Absolute. They will receive 100% less healing but do 100% more damage. Spells will also be instant cast. Now that we've covered the main mechanic of the fight, let's go over Cho'gall's abilities. Cho'gall is a 2-phase encounter, so we will start by covering the Phase 1 abilities. Conversion can be thought of just like a mind control, except instead of turning your powers on the raid, converted players will begin channeling worshipping Cho'gall. This causes the boss to gain a stack of Twisted Devotion every 3 seconds. The Twisted Devotion buff will increase the boss's damage done by 10% per stack for 20 seconds. 3 raid members are converted at a time, and all 3 must be interrupted from casting worship as fast as possible. There are multiple ways to do this quickly. In this video, you may notice we used mages to cast Dragon's Breath on top of the raid and instantly interrupt all 3 converted players. Priest's Psychic Scream or just single target interrupts will also work well. Flame's Orders is an ability that will add 20,000 fire damage to each of Cho'gall's melee swings and spawn patches of fire around the room. These, like always, should be avoided. Shadow's Orders will add a shadow damage AoE to Cho'gall's melee swings. Each swing will hit the entire raid for big AoE damage. Fury of Cho'gall is this encounter's tank swap mechanic. He will blast the target, causing 30,000 shadow and physical damage, and increases damage taken by shadow and physical by 20%. This is only cast on his primary aggro target and will last 45 seconds. Just have the second tank taunt the boss when this occurs. During Phase 1, Cho'gall will summon ads called Corrupting Adherents. These have 4.98 or roughly 5 million health. Corrupting Adherents come with their own set of abilities. Depravity deals around 22,000 shadow damage to the whole raid and causes corruption. This 1.5 second cast should be interrupted every time. Sprayed Corruption is a frontal cone ability that deals around 35,000 damage and applies corrupted blood. Corrupting Crash is just like the familiar Shadow Crash ability. It deals 45,000 shadow damage to any players it hits and gives corruption. Corrupting Crash will take the same amount of time to hit the ground, regardless of its distance to the target. This means players close to the ad have no more or less time to move out of the crash zone than players far away from the ad. Upon death, the corrupting adherent will spill its corrupted blood. Anybody standing in it will take 15,000 shadow damage and gain corrupted blood. Around 30 seconds after the corrupting adherent has been summoned, Cho'gall will cast Fester Blood. If the adherent is still alive, they will gain Festering Blood, causing them to deal 45,000 shadow damage to the raid every 2 seconds. If the adherent is dead when this is cast, 5 ads will spawn from their blood on the ground that must be killed before reaching the raid. These ads have 300,000 HP each and are snareable and rootable. Their melee swings will cause corruption, so it's important for nobody to be hit by them. When Cho'gall reaches 25% health, after having a brief conversation with himself, Phase 2 of the fight will begin. The only Phase 1 ability Cho'gall retains during this part of the fight is Fury of Cho'gall, so tank switching is still necessary. Because he is now completely corrupted, Corruption of the Old God will cause the boss to deal 5,000 shadow damage every 2 seconds to all players. Darkened Creations will spawn at the beginning of Phase 2, and every 30 seconds later. These have 166,000 health and spawn randomly in a circle around Cho'gall. These tentacles will cast Debilitating Beam, reducing healing and damage by 75%. It deals 5,000 shadow damage and causes corrupted blood every second. These ads must all be killed as quickly as possible before focusing DPS on the boss. Our Phase 1 positioning is very simple. The boss is tanked in the middle of the room, facing towards the throne. Melee attack from his rear, while range stack in another pile behind the boss. One of the first things your raid must figure out is how conversion is being handled. We use mages to Dragon's Breath on top of the raid. With good timing, this instantly breaks all of the mind controls without allowing Cho'gall to gain any stacks of Twisted Devotion. If your raid is light on mages, Psychic Scream is a great option. Any series of counterspell-like abilities will also work, but are single target, of course. Because the raid moves somewhat together during this phase, we put our tank healers, 2 pallies in this case, on the side of the group. This means tank healers should have to move less and be more easily able to maintain healing on the tanks. Because they are out of the raid, however, 2 of our mages are assigned to counterspell the tank healers if they are converted. Flames orders and Shadows orders are easy to deal with. Simply direct more healing to the tank or raid accordingly. Tanks should make sure to be vocal and taunt quickly after gaining the Fury of Cho'gall debuff. When Cho'gall summons a corrupting adherent, the off tank should pick the ad up and drag it next to the boss. While the ad is up, the raid must be cautious to not be hit by any corrupting crashes. There is a large purple swirling graphic on the ground where the crash will land that gives approximately a 3-second warning. During this ad phase, it is not uncommon for the raid to spread out a little bit for crashes, but whenever possible, players should stack back up to make interrupting conversion and healing easier. Make sure to assign 2 interrupters to the ad so that it does not cast depravity on the raid. Ranged DPS should focus on the ad, while melee DPS cleave damage between the adherent and the boss. When the ad reaches a low percentage, we use 15. The tank should begin dragging him to the back of the room away from the raid. Range can continue to DPS him, but do not kill the ad until it is in the back area. During this move to the back of the room, the ad may still cast depravity. Have 2 ranged DPS ready to counterspell the ad since melee will be out of range. Ideally, the ad should make it to the back of the room just as it dies. Here you can see I Leap of Faith the tank back to the raid in order to minimize the corruption stacks he gains. This isn't entirely necessary, but if you choose to do it, know that this ability will be up for every ad phase. 30 seconds after the ad has spawned, Cho'gall will use his Fester Blood ability. Ideally, the ad is dead at this point. and 5 Blood of the Old God ads will spawn out of the blood he's left behind. Use hunter traps, knockbacks, and any other snares to keep these from reaching the raid. Ranged DPS should AoE them down. Think of these like ads from the Sourfang encounter. Slow them and root them before they reach the raid and kill them. Once the ads are down, refocus all of the raid's DPS on Cho'gall. That's an entire cycle of Phase 1. It's important to keep corruption stacks low because this will help your raid survive longer in Phase 2. Repeat this until the boss's health reaches 25% and prepare for your next part of the encounter. Positioning for Phase 2 is a little different than Phase 1. We split our raid into 4 DPS piles, with healers occupying the middle. The boss is still tanked in the same spot, but because darkened creations spawn randomly in a circle around him, splitting the raid up allows them to be killed quicker. Have raid members focus on the creations closest to them first, then assist with any still alive. Only DPS the boss after all creations have been killed. It should not take very long to kill all of the creations with correct targeting. Healing in this phase will go up over time as the raid's corruption stacks increase, but by handling the mechanics correctly, this phase can still feel stable. Make sure to dispel corruption accelerated immediately, as it will be being applied to the raid very quickly in this phase. People with corruption sickness should make sure to face away from the raid so they do not vomit on other players. Overall, this phase is a DPS race. You're trying to kill Cho'gall before your entire raid either dies or is corrupted. If you can handle all of the abilities and switch targets at the right times, this should be easy. Hopefully, the tips provided in our Cho'gall guide will help lead your raid to victory in the Bastion of Twilight. This is Kinaesthesia at L2R saying good luck. See you around the site.